And we're live. Yay! Welcome everybody to the TNR Live, which is also known as the Travel News Report Live, where me and someone else usually just talk about travel stuff, whatever's in the news and some other interesting topics that we have for the day. Today's topic will be tour professionals and tipping. But first, I want to introduce myself. Yeah, I want to introduce yourself to me. That would be a good trick now, wouldn't it? I want to introduce myself to you. My name is Brad Simon, and I am a tour operator and a tour manager. I've been doing this for several years now, and I love being a tour manager. It's a lot of fun to take people on vacation. And I have a co-host today, but I will introduce him in just a second. First, I want to tell you, you can contact us or interact with us. In fact, we would love it if you do. You can use the comments on YouTube. You can do the hashtag TNR Live on Twitter. Make sure you put the hashtag in so we know you're talking to us and we will see it because I've got a search right here for it. You can also, if you're watching or have Facebook and you don't want to log in because you have to log into either one of those, you can use Facebook and you can actually message me or Matt and get a hold of us. And I believe, Matt, if you even have if you have our phone number, you can text us too if you would like. So I've introduced myself a little bit to you, and I think it's time for Matt to introduce himself to you. Matt?
Great to hear. Great to be here. Thanks very much for having me as a guest again, and we're getting to be a regular here. I always enjoy it because we have great conversations here. For those of you who haven't seen this before, I'm a tour director who started in the tour business back in September of 2007, and I've been working steadily since then. I've been very lucky to have some good opportunities, and I like being able to give back to get the conversation started, to help new people that are in the business, and I like all of those kind of activities. So hopefully this TNR Live is going to be something that helps people, gives us good material to talk about, and it gives us good things to think about. And in fact, that's kind of the reason I'm joining in today. Brad and I were talking the other day about tipping, and it is a multifaceted thing. I got myself in some trouble this year with the topic of tipping, and so it's one that everybody has their own way of addressing it, and it would be fun to hear what other people think about it. There's a lot of questions that go along with that, and I'm just going to kind of dive right in here. I work for a company that has a booklet that they give to all their tour directors, to all their guests on the tours. And that booklet includes a page that talks about tipping. It explains that the company itself takes care of tipping for all of the provided meals. It takes care of the tipping for the hotel staff and so forth, except for tipping the maids and tipping the tour director and the coach operator. And that is one of the topics that everybody addresses a little bit differently. And the question is, to start out with, if there's anybody who wants to comment to us on this, that lots of people that I know will say something in their introductory meeting about tipping. They'll drop a hint. They'll give some guidelines. And I'm just curious as to how many of you out there might be doing something like that as well.
Yeah, and Matt and I were talking a lot about this. And today's show is a lot more for the tour professionals. But if you're not a tour professional, feel free to chime in because we'd like to hear from you too. I know the company that Matt works for. I did a couple tours for them also, and that was a fantastic thing that they allowed you to actually say, and you tip the tour manager, or you look on page blah 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 if you want to have guidelines on how to tip the tour manager and the driver. Now, the companies that I work for a lot, you can't say anything. In fact, if you mention it, you are probably going to get in trouble. Even though during the course of like some of the longer tours, when it's over 4 days, guests will joke because these guests have been on this tour with this tour company multiple times, and they will joke, well, that's coming out of your tip, or that's coming out of your envelope at the end of the week, or whatever. So at least you know that they know it's appropriate. But what I would like to know is, how many of you guys know that you are supposed to tip your tour manager or your tour guide or your step-on guide or your driver guide? Because I was actually a driver guide in Alaska. And what would you normally tip them? I know I prefer to get about 50 bucks per day per person, but that's completely outrageous because that's not even a good guideline. That's like way high. It's more like 5 bucks or 3 bucks, five to 7 bucks. What is the price rate? Matt, what is the rate that you say on your tours, or do you?
Well, what's recommended in the booklet that's given to the guests is $5 to $9 per person per day while we're out on the road. And the guideline for the drivers, I believe, is somewhere around $2 to $7 or something of that sort. And I wonder, I oftentimes wish I could ask my groups as they arrive, how many of you knew you were going to need to tip or that tipping would be recommended? Virtually all of my guests always do, but there is occasionally one or two people that appear to have not planned that into their budget. And it's an interesting thing.
And I agree with that. Now, I don't know if we don't want to talk specifics on some of these, but I know that, and like you can kind of tell between the two companies that Matt and I do a lot of our work for, their company is very open with the tips. So the tips, I notice, tend to be, you do a little better at the end of the trip than on the trips that I do, because you're not allowed to mention anything. You can't say the rate, because I'll have people for a 4-day trip give me $5, which that's kind of unacceptable in my book, but they might be thinking, hey, that's a great tip for them. And it's all, it's all perception, or what's the word I'm looking for? I'm, again, losing words. It happens to me a lot, doesn't it, Matt?
It's just relative to what they're used to.
Exactly, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. And sometimes, when you say, it's $5 to $9 per person per day, they hear $5 to $9 per day. They don't hear per person. So you get a couple that'll give you $5. It's like, that's even more of it. To me, when I'm like in a wait staff, if I'm talking to a waiter, if I have a great waiter, and they're fantastic, your average, you tip about 20%. That's the average for decent service. Well, if I have awesome service, I've tipped up to 30% if it's really good service, and if it's bad service, I tip less. So I don't know if they don't know what to tip and they're only giving me $5 and they think it's a great tip, but I have to keep in mind that I have to keep that in mind and not feel insulted. But then again, what if they're trying to insult me because I sucked, which I don't think I do.
I gotcha. And I mean, I tend to be one of those people who tips fairly generously as long as I've gotten relatively good service. And certainly I start at 20% and go up from there, unless there's something that's really noticeably wrong with the service. I think that a lot of tour directors are that way. We use a term sometimes, I don't know if you've ever heard it, Brad, but tipping karma.
Yes, I have heard tipping karma.
And so that's kind of what I live by, is I want to make sure that I am paying into the karma as best I can.
I agree with that. And let's talk, I mean, it sounds like we're talking a little bit too much about tipping us. I don't want to talk about tipping us. Let's talk about, the other people that you're supposed to tip, whether you're on tour, mostly when you're on tour, because we talk more about travel than anything, but in hospitality in general, some people don't know that you're supposed to tip I'll let you finish the sentence.
Well, I mean, one of the obvious ones is, do you tip the chambermaid? And it's not something I ever did back in the business world, but once I got into tour work, I discovered that it's expected, or at least it's hoped for. And so I typically will leave $1 on the bed every day when I leave my room, and oftentimes $2 for the chambermaid. I mean, that's essentially tipping on what would be $10, a $10 meal. You'd tip that much if you're tipping 20%. So, I'm kind of valuing the work that they do in the room. Question is, what do you do, Brad? Do you leave money for the chambermaid?
I do. And I leave, $1 or $2 per day. Sometimes what I'll do, because sometimes I'll leave my expensive camera in my room, so I'll put a do not disturb, so I don't want them in my room. and they don't go in, so I don't usually tip them on those days because nobody cleaned it. But yeah, I'll leave $1 or $2 each night, that so they can have that. And like you said, and you have to do it every night, because every day there's a different one doing it. You can't just leave them, like if you stay for 5 days and leave $5 or $10, who gets it?
And incidentally, Brad, while we're talking here, I definitely would like to listen, hear from our viewers. And if you want to do so, you can definitely comment over here on the YouTube channel. There's a comment section there. You do have to be signed into YouTube to do that. Also, we're monitoring Twitter, and so you can contact Brad at the Travelman68 that he has listed on his lower third there, or myself at Photomat62, and use the hashtag TNR Live. We definitely like to hear from people because we're curious as to what you do and what your experience has been. Obviously, when I have guests come from other countries, Brad, I know you've worked with Australians before. I've worked with English and Irish and Scottish and Germans in particular, Austrians, Swiss, and so forth, and they have their own rules about tipping, or their own traditions about tipping, customs about tipping. And I find that most other countries believe that the service provider should be paid a living wage, should be paid an honest wage, and therefore they don't feel like tipping is that important. And it's one of those things, again, an awkward situation when you're standing there in front of the group and you have to explain to them that you're in America now and tipping is considered the custom. And that's because we don't oftentimes pay servers and service providers a minimum wage or a living wage, and they really live from their tips.
Yes, and Matt, if you could talk a little bit more, I'm about to post a question on the Twitter. But keep talking for a minute, all right?
That's one of the big questions is how do you deal with that cultural difference? I'm going to be interested as we have more and more Asian guests coming to the U.S. as the prospects of China and countries like that are looking up. How are they going to handle tipping? How will they see that? Will they see us as service providers constantly with our hand out, or is it something that they'll understand from their own culture?
And so, I have a little extra insight on that. I have the insight of my wife is Chinese kind of insight, and I actually, just before the show, I asked her that very question. Number one, in China, they don't tip. And as you know, if you've had Australians and New Zealanders, they don't like to tip either. They don't understand it, like Matt just explained. But what I asked my wife, I said, but when you go overseas, do you do tips? And she said, yes, they are told that they should do that. In fact, she told me that on a tour that they are encouraged every single day to give the tour manager $5 to $10, and they give them every single night. They give them money. That is something that I want to do. Chinese tours.
Yeah, that's definitely something that that I would like to do too. I'd like to get that kind of money. I was also interested, lots of times as tour directors, when we take a group into a place, they're so grateful to have us having brought that busload of people there and all the business that brings. They will sometimes provide a free meal to the tour director and or to the coach operator. And the question is, when you get a free meal, do you tip the person for that free meal? Do you tip your server? And I'm just curious as to what everybody else out there does. For me, absolutely, I definitely do tip that individual. I don't know about you, Brad, but I think they're still providing that amount of work, and they're still counting on those tips.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that I do is and I've seen other people do things a little differently. Let's say that the lunch was valued at like $10. I'll leave them $5 because the meal didn't cost me anything, and they're waiting on 40 people of my people, and they're usually pretty demanding, or sometimes they can be demanding, and they have to have 40 people in and out in about an hour. So I'm going to give them a little extra, and I also tip on the after-tax price, not the pre-tax, because, again, tipping karma. You're muted, Matt.
That's absolutely right. I was muted for a moment. That's absolutely right, though, and you're right. The amount that the difference is going to make of the pre-tax or post-tax is so minimal in most places that I would rather just give them that little bit of extra if they provide good service. I can be a real meanie when it comes to somebody who it's hard to get their attention. They don't get the order right. They don't seem to care. If they don't really care, then they're not really gonna. I'm not gonna really care about figuring out a big tip for them. So it's not something where I'm particularly forgiving, but when I do tip for good service, I tend to be generous.
I agree. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I'm curious if we have any of our guests, tour guests that are out there. What would you think if you got onto a tour and on the final day when tipping time comes, the tour director left envelopes on your seat with your names on them for you to put your tips into? And how would you react to that? I actually know some people who've done that before, tour directors that have done that before.
And I have heard of that too. And that's something that, right now we're talking very blatantly about it. And I would never talk this blatantly about it with my guests on a tour ever. Just because it gets to be a very uncomfortable topic when you're talking about, give me money, give me money. And that to me seems a little too aggressive. Giving envelopes is like, here, you're supposed to give me money, now give me money. That just doesn't fit my personality. And Matt, it sounds like it doesn't fit your personality either.
I'd be uncomfortable with it. I feel I'm always uncomfortable even talking about the issue of tipping, but because it is part of the money that we depend on to live, I make myself do so. But I would never do that. I know another tour director, and apparently he gets good response from this, but he actually prints out a page that does the multiplication of how many days they're on the road and the rate that that they can tip, and he does it at different levels, and one of them's outstanding service, and one of them's great service, and one of them's okay service, and so forth. On down, and then points out to folks that they've just had their really great service because he's one of the top tour directors, and so you should be tipping at this level. And he puts it right out there, and apparently does very well with it.
Well, I guess if you have that kind of rapport with people, you can get away with it, but it's still, and you and I have the same personality. I still wouldn't feel comfortable with saying, I know I'm awesome, and since I am so awesome, you should be giving me $10 every day. Each and every one of you, $10 every day. And if you don't, that means I suck.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think you're right. I just feel very uncomfortable with it as well. One of the other things that we have when we do tours is oftentimes we have people who step on board and give us a local tour. Some cities require that. If you are not a licensed guide for New York or for Washington, D.C., and there's a number of other cities as well. I think Charleston as well requires licensed guides. So sometimes you have to have somebody step on board to give that tour, and they're being paid typically by the tour company. Question is this, is if you're a tour director listening to this, do you come right out and say something to your guests and say, this is a situation where it's proper to give a couple extra dollars to that person, or do you let them fend for themselves and mention it if they want to, otherwise end up with little or no tip?
And now I forget the company you work with, Matt. I forget what their policy was, but the policy with the company I work for, they're okay with me mentioning something to the effect of, and we both learned this at the same place at ITMI, where you say, and the tour director or the tour guide today, he was great, wasn't he? Don't forget to show your appreciation as we exit the coach, or something to that fashion. I usually even say it before we pick them up. And I say, just a reminder, this guy, it's I don't say it exactly like this. I kind of basically tell him this guy's doing this for tips also. He makes a living on this, and if you could show us your appreciation afterwards, it would be great. So I make sure that they know, and usually the local guides make out pretty good, and then I don't.
Do you ever pass a hat around the bus?
I never pass a hat. I find that also a little too aggressive. That's the same in my book as leaving envelopes. What
So,
about you? Tell me what you do, Matt. I want to hear what you do.
well, I've not been faced too often with the situation where we have to find another way of getting the tip to the guide, because when we do the tours where I use guides the most, which is in Yellowstone National Park, the guide is with us to the end of the day. So the guide steps off of the bus at the end of the day, and as everybody gets off, he shakes their hand or she shakes their hand, and the money is handed over at that time. But I can recall a couple of times when we had a partial day guide with us in Washington, D.C., for instance, and we just dropped them off on a corner, and everybody was still in their seats. There was no chance for the guide to get a tip. And a couple of times when I was new to the business, it caught me off guard, and I ended up having a few step-on guides that didn't get a tip from my groups. So I'm always curious how one handles that.
In that case, and I same boat. I did the same thing as you did. Is I'm like, oh crap, he didn't get anything. What I will do, again, hopefully I've done a little preparation or some homework, and I kind of understand how we're dropping the guide off. The last time that we get off the bus and do a picture stop, I'll say, now guys, this will be the only time we have an opportunity to show him our appreciation, and then go that route. That tends to work pretty well. And of course, if he's got a really nice fistful of $5 bills in his hand, the rest of the tour goes a little bit nicer. And if he doesn't, he might be a little put off. So there is that risk.
So you do sort of a midway tipping kind of thing.
Right, and it is a risk, because what if he gets, a nice fat tip and he says, well, I'm good, I'm just going to roll the rest of this. That would be a dumb thing for him to do for future work. But again, if he gets a crappy tip and says, well, screw you, I'm not going to do anything else, again, it all depends. I personally don't know any local guides in any city, and I'm sure they exist, but I personally don't know any that would have the personality of like, well, screw you, if you're not going to tip me, I'm not going to give you anything after here. So, and also you want to make sure that it's, within a short amount of time from the time you get that last picture stop and you actually drop them off. You don't want to like do it in a 2-hour stretch, because then that will leave a bad taste in the guy's mouth if it's a bad tip day.
I can see that we have a number of viewers out there, and I really would love to ask the question of you, if you are tour directors. Do you address tipping openly with your guests? And you can respond to us in a couple of different ways. You can write to me on my my Facebook page. I'll get the message. If you send me a private message, that is, on my Facebook, I'll get that. You can also respond to our Twitter, which you can respond to either Brad or I at TravelMan68, or my own, which is PhotoMat62, and use the hashtag TNRLive. And I just even heard a message just come in now, so I'll have to go and look and see what that is. Brad, why don't you tell us?
Well,
I don't know.
no, you go ahead. I got something I can talk about real quick. You read that. Now, my question is also for the tour managers that are out there watching. Now, you have a group of people, like let's say the Australians, or the people, or a culture that just generally doesn't tip, and they ask you about it, and they say, well, or even local, if you have local people or you go outside or whatever, and they say, well, this meal's included, what about tipping? Because I get that asked at least once every tour. What is your response when they say, do we have to tip on this included meal? I know what my response is, and I want to see if anybody else has a similar response. And I believe there's a maybe possibility that my wife is actually watching right now. Hi, honey. We may be having technical difficulties right now. So anyway, Matt, did you read your questions? And I hope they were for this.
No, it's just somebody checking in, saying hello to us, and it's good to hear that Lucero is listening to us. But to that question, when people ask me whether they need to tip for a provided meal, I say to them, frankly, that is included in the money that we pay the hotel. I mean, sorry, pay to the restaurant, to the food provider for the meal. But you are welcome for a particular good service or somebody that you take a liking to leave something extra for them, and it would be greatly appreciated.
And that's exactly how I respond. In fact, last year, in a week, I take off with my Australians for 3 weeks, so we won't have another TNR live show for probably more than a month, unfortunately. It kind of sucks because I enjoy it. I actually really do enjoy doing these. I know you do too, man. But anyway, they last year said, "What about you?" And my tip was actually because they were Australians and New Zealanders, they actually built a tip into my pay. And I said that. I said, well, the tip is built into my pay. But if you find that I'm exceptionally good, feel free. And I had a good enough rapport at the time when I said this. I said, but feel free to give me a little extra. And I said it with a smile and a giggle, and they all laughed. And you know what? I got a little extra. It wasn't a lot extra. It was, for 8 days, it was maybe $100 or something like that. But it was the fact that they gave me a little extra, and they said, we really do like you. Because they knew I was already covered in that fashion. They're like, we think you went a little overboard and we appreciate it. So it made me feel good.
Yeah, it's oftentimes said at church that it is far better to give than to receive. And I do get a lot of joy out of, particularly if you can leave a surprising tip for somebody. I always do that. And if that is to say, if it's somebody who provides very good service. And I do enjoy watching that person smile when they pick up that 40% tip or something of that sort. Now, granted, I don't do that on a $50 or $60 meal normally because I can't afford to do that. But if it's a small, if I gone and had breakfast and it's a $10 bill or a $20 bill, sometimes I'll be a little bit more generous, and I like to surprise people that way.
And speaking of that, there was a video on April 1st. It was an April Fool's joke, but it was in a good fashion. I don't know if you saw the video because it was kind of viral, where they were doing a pay it forward. They usually call it prank it forward, but they were doing a prank it forward in a very nice way. There was a waitress who, was working a couple jobs, trying to do this, trying to do that. She was doing okay, but she could use a new car, and she was doing yoga classes on the side. She was teaching yoga classes on the side, and it was kind of neat. What they did is they staged this. Her friends and the store all staged this. The first guest that she got left her $1,000 tip. Just $1,000 tip. The second guest was a yoga instructor who wanted to use her in her class and help her grow her class. And then the third person gave her a car.
I love that. That was I saw that as well, and I just loved that one. That was a great video, and you could just see how surprised and shocked she was. And yeah, just being able to do something good for somebody like that's a great thing.
Oh, I know, and I wish, I always say if I won the lottery, I would be, even a better tipper, or just, I would love to drop $100 on a $50 bill. It's like, here's an extra 100, or I even know some wait staff, locally that are good friends of mine, and every now and then she will have, just a fantastic group, and it was like a bunch of Australians. She lived in Australia for 2 years, so she really had a good rapport with anybody that comes in from Australia. She showed this one thing. It was like a $50 tab, and they left her an additional $50 tip. So it's things like that, and she was woohoo, all excited. And like you said, it's better to give than to receive, and it is a lot of fun. I enjoy. I don't even have to see what I don't need to see their reaction, but I know that if I get a $10 meal and I leave an extra $3, granted it's only $3, but they see that as that's 30%. That's huge. That's a big deal. Now, if I have a $20 bill and I leave $30, that's a lot. That's so, and I will do that for exceptional service, and I don't even care what their reaction is. I just know that will make their day.
Yeah, and it's a good thing. That's the tipping karma we were talking about. And anyway, I think that kind of covers all the questions or topics that I wanted to throw out there. Just tipping is one that we oftentimes have a lot of questions about, and how do you handle this thing, which is a cultural thing, a tradition thing, a manners kind of thing. You know, typically I think we're said in our said in our culture that you really shouldn't talk about that. It's just either it happens or it doesn't. You don't want to sound like you're begging for it. So
exactly. Real quick, we about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we actually had this guy Ron Brown. Ronnie, is it Ron or Ronnie? I can't really tell. He stopped in and saying good day always to the panel and glad to be here. Hi Ron, how are you? It's nice to see you. He was in Florida last time we talked. He was a driver. He's a driver. Well, probably still is a driver. Now I think Ron, are you a truck driver? I believe you said you were a coach driver, and if you are, we would love to hear any story that you have about, you know, getting an awesome tip that you got one time, or something that you felt that you got stiffed, but keep the language pleasant, please. We would love to hear it.
Later on, for anybody who's watching this video after the fact, I hope that you'll still comment on the YouTube channel as to in the comments section going along with this video, as to your thoughts on all the various questions we brought up here, because it would be interesting to hear them and get that discussion going. And another great place is to check out TNR Live. It is a great page here on Facebook where you can bring up those topics as well.
Okay, so he says Ron will work, and what you were just saying is if you do leave a comment after the video's gone live and it's just posted and it's no longer live, I monitor these comments. I get them. I get the information on them, and I will see them, and I'll respond to them. So please leave a comment after the fact. It would be great. Now Ron says he's driven local truck, but he has driven passengers in the past. Now my question to you, Ron, which do you like better? Do you like the truck or do you like the passengers, and then why? See, you didn't know you were going to get all these questions, did you?
I wish we could get more coach operators on here too, because they are such a crucial part of what we do. And of course, we also help each other in terms of how we get tipped. You know, a good tour director can really help up the coach driver's visibility and the visibility for the things that he does on the road. A good coach driver can also, you know, say things behind the scenes that point out what the tour director is doing, and giving people a sense of
teamwork.
Teamwork, exactly. I was also going to say a sense of reference as to how good that tour director is compared to other tour directors, particularly if they haven't been on a tour before. So you're really able to help each other or hinder each other. And I know that any of us who've been out there for more than a few years on the road have had both experiences.
Yeah, now, I don't remember if we talked about that just amongst you and I, or if we had actually mentioned that on the show before. Now, Ron's replied to us already. He says he tries to tip always, and he appreciates any tips that he's received. And he says he liked passengers a heck of a lot more satisfying to him. He said he liked to have people on it. Sounds like Ron likes to chat. I like those kind of drivers that are fun to chat with, that'll chat with the guests. And that's, like you were talking before, the teamwork is what really makes it look good. And Matt, do you remember if we talked about how the interaction between the driver and the tour manager, was that on the live show?
I'm going to have to sneeze here.
Okay, you sneeze.
Excuse me. I'm allergic.
I tried to cover up the sneeze.
I'm allergic to your questions. No, I believe we did discuss that here, and
Okay,
we talked a lot about. We had a whole program that talked about the relationship and working conditions between coach operators and tour directors, and we shared good and bad stories. Happily, for me, most of the stories are good stories, and I think if we determine that a lot of that can be controlled by how the tour director starts the interaction and lays the groundwork for the work together and opens those doors for communication.
Yeah, okay. Now you're jogging my memory now. because I think that's one that Ron was in on, that he partook in, and that's the one that he had a few things to say that were all good. And Ron, I appreciate you showing up. You know, it's nice to see a regular every now and then. And I was wondering if he has any questions for us on this topic, or just any questions in general, because if not, we're probably going to be wrapping this up pretty quick. We're running at about a half an hour right now, and these at the 45 minutes, they tend to get kind of long, and this gets tiring after a while, even though it's a lot of fun.
It is, and I think we always like hearing each other talk, so we don't want to get carried away with that. I think this has been a good show. It's been good to see people popping in and out of the conversation, and it is always great to hear your feedback. So I hope people will continue to tune in and share their feedback with us.
And of course, if you really like the show, I'm going to do my little promo now. If you really like the show, you can click on the link in the YouTube description for the Patreon. It says support us on Patreon. And that's to support this show, the TNR Live show. I know I can't do it for for about a month, maybe 6 weeks, because, well, I'm working. I need the money. You know, I can't, YouTube doesn't pay the bills even remotely close. But it would help us in order to maybe schedule it a little bit more often, or a little more regularly, because our schedule is a little irregular right now because we don't really have a choice. And still going to New York. You got to check out the New York trip. It's a really great trip. Just look up New York City trip, or go to letsgoroadtrippin.com, and you can check out our current or recent trips or current trips or whatever that's called. I don't even know the link on my site. That's bad. Also, just so you guys know, a little teaser, next one I'm planning is Costa Rica in November. Who wants to go there?
That sounds like a great place. I've heard only great things about Costa Rica, and you know, regardless of the tour you're on, you're going to a beautiful country. Then you go on one of Brad's tours, and you know he'll be throwing in a lot of extra fun things that will keep you engaged. His commentary and so forth is always interesting. So
thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. And Ron says he's very glad to be here, and he'll come back with that. I'm having trouble talking. He'll be back next time, is kind of what he's saying, as long as he's got the opportunity. We're going to try to do these. I like to do them on Sunday evenings. It really works well timing-wise. It's usually the better time for other tour managers and other professionals and just people in general to watch this. But quite honestly, Sundays are hard days for tour managers right now, because we're just now winding down from the trip. I just got done with the trip yesterday. I'm pretty tired right now. I don't know. I haven't even had time to shave today. I still have my paperwork to do, but Matt and I decided we were going to do this, and doggone it, we're going to do it.
And I think one of the things we'll be looking for from feedback is we definitely want to know what kind of topics people, whether they are people who enjoy going on tours, or whether they're people who enjoy leading tours, or however that goes. What kind of topics would you like to hear on this conversation? We've got lots of things we'd like to talk about, but we also want to address things that the audience is interested in hearing. The other thing is, hopefully we'll be able to work this out where Brad and I will get to do one where one or the other of us is, you know, probably more than likely me, be traveling somewhere that has nothing to do with how much Brad travels. It's just I know he needs the technology that he has in his home to set these up. But hopefully, maybe while I'm out on the road, either in Europe or here in the Western U.S., we'll get a chance to do one of those from some exotic location.
And that would be really cool. And of course, if you want me to be able to do one of these down the road, you can always support the channel.
Very much so. Patreon.
Patreon.com. Yeah, I don't expect to ever get enough money for someone to buy me an expensive laptop, because it'd take a nice laptop to do it. Anyway, a couple other things really quick. If you like the channel, subscribe to the channel. Hit like on the video down here. Share the video if you've gotten anything out of it and you want to share it to your friends. It'd be great. Comment, like we said before, even if this video isn't live, leave us a comment on tips, gratuities, tour stuff in general. I don't care. Give us a topic. Tell us what you want us to talk about, and we'll do it. I have no problem with it. And if you are a tour manager and you want to be a guest because you're sick and tired of seeing Matt almost as much as I am, hey, let me know. I'll get rid of him and put you on, all right?
Please. I need my Sunday nights back.
Please get rid of Matt. So
Okay.
anyway, Matt, do you have anything you need to say?
I just want to say thank you again for letting me be a guest here. I've been enjoying being part of this, and I will gladly give my Sunday nights up for you.
Thanks again, Matt. Real quick, Ron says, yes, mobile would be cool, and look for you guys. He's always looking for us on the YouTubes. And you have a great night, Ron. And as always, to everybody, safe travels.